ICQ Podcast episode 376. Buying Handy Talkies, new or secondhand. Hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this 376th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, Martin MNMRB is joined by Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie, Golf Zero Charlie India Bravo to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BRY, runs up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on Handy Talkies, buying them new or second-hand. Well, as always, your ICQ podcast is brought to you advert-free by the very kind donations by you, the listeners. And this episode, we'd like to thank our monthly subscription donors for being there for us and helping us pay our way here across the internet. We hope you find some value in our show and would ask you, if you do, to visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where what you can do is you can turn that value into a monetary sum, send it our way, and we'll put it towards our running costs to keep us going and keep producing the show for you every fortnight. Now, talking about the show and showing said value, let's get on with it. And we're going to join Martin, Chris, Frank, Bill and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including ARRL Youth Licensing Grant Program and 40 megahertz for Belgium. As always, I hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Hi guys, and welcome to episode 376 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight's roundtable for that episode. Tonight we have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi Chris.
Hi Martin, how are you doing?
Bit grouchy as you well know, but we'll get through it.
We need to cheer you up, don't we, somehow? We've got some coffee about somewhere we can feed you.
I think coffee would make it far worse.
Oh, okay. Right, okay.
Yeah. Moving to the other side of the pond, we got Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin and everyone. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, great to have you. We also have Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Martin. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's a good evening from you.
Good evening, Bill.
Evening, Bill. But equally, Bill, we got the real thing. We have the real thing tonight. We have Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Oh, good evening, Martin. By the way, you don't need coffee. You need tea with Dunkin' biscuits.
I don't do biscuits.
Listen, as James Brown in the U.S. said, we got the right one, baby. We got Leslie.
Yeah. It's Mrs. B that does the biscuits, not me. So there you go. And I think the guys are going to try and have to keep me a little bit under control tonight because I'm a bit grouchy. Can't help it, but...
Grouchy.
Yeah. So, looking at our first news story, ARRL Youth Licensing Grant Program is now basically in operation. I've complained or thought many times that, I see what they're doing and it's very hard to means test people. But I do feel there is a cost to doing anything, and you make your choices, and it's an education period for a youngster. But I'm going to not grouch on anymore about that. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Well, there were plenty of people who did, and there are at least two sides, if not more, that have been unheard. And anytime you do a set-aside program with money, you'll have some people say, well, what's the need, and so on and so on. Nevertheless, as is the case with most groups, this has kind of gone through the vetting process with the ARRL board, and it is. And so it will cover for one time the $35 application fee for a new radio license for candidates younger than 18 years of age if they're using the ARRL VEC program. Now, Bill can check me on this when it's his turn, but I suspect that means that helps the ARRL VEC program, of which there are several others here in the States. So it is something that does promote access, and it will be up to them to thrash out who are the worthy candidates and things, but it will help some get licensed. And I guess there's at least an honorific thing for a national group to select Little Johnny or Little Jane or whoever is the recipient. Hey, they got that paid for. So I'm going to leave it at that. It's not a terrible amount of money as things go. And the ARRL has spent an awful lot of money on several things that some people think, what happened there? So this isn't a big ticket item, but it is what it is. And I hope it gets some new hams into the hobby, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank, that we need to get more people into the hobby and we've got to keep it live and all those sort of things. And I've had my say on this one before, that there's a cost to doing anything. And this is just another cost of the hobby, getting your license. And once you've passed your license, I know it's not a phenomenal amount. I mean, I've had a license for 10 years plus in the US, and it didn't cost me to renew this time round. So, and my UK license doesn't physically cost me. But equally, there is a cost to doing all the work you have to do. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I like seeing this. This is actually really good news. The idea being is that if you take your exam session through an ARRL VEC, you still have to pay your $35 application fee, but they'll cut you a check later and mail it to you. Likewise, I think this has been around for a little while, but candidates younger than 18 would pay exam session fees of $5 instead of $15 as well. So there's multiple layers to this. Trying to encourage folks to get their license through an ARRL VEC team. And Frank, real quick, because I don't know this off the top of my head, they're probably the largest one, right? Next to W5YI.
I think they are. The W5YI is large, and there's a couple of small ones too.
Laurel's pretty large around here too for giving testing. And I just looked up at my ARRL volunteer examiner certificate, and I got to renew mine this year. So I'll also keep that in mind as well. But they're gonna reimburse young amateurs up to 1,000 of them to begin with that are under 18. I thought this program's at least novel to give it a try, see if it works, collect some data. Oh, wait, we figured out they don't use data, right, Frank?
Well, they don't let you use their data.
Sorry, I had to throw the data comment in there. But it's very nice that they're trying something. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I remember I thought it was good value, actually, because I did all three of my American exams in one sitting in Milton Keynes in the UK. I think it cost us £15, Chris, if I'm right, because you did it the same day. And I thought, well, three exams for £15, £10, which would have been about $15.
I think the cost, Martin, wasn't a cost for the exam as such. I think it was a donation to, for people's time, and not time, but their petrol, etc., to actually turn up and put the exam on forwards. I don't think there was actually a cost for at that time anyway, at least with the licensing authorities. I think it was more of a cost for people to take it, that would put on the exam.
All right. Well, as I say. But what's your thoughts on this news story?
My thoughts? I think it's a good idea. I think that it's an investment. We have a chronic lack of young people in our hobby, in my opinion, and we're always hearing about how do we get youth into the hobby, and I think this is another idea. It may or may not work if we get a proportion of people that have come through the system and got a license paid for by the ARRL and they stay in the hobby, then I think that's a good investment. Now, I think as people were alluding to earlier, we need to measure that and see if it is successful or not, but I think it's definitely worth a shot. And yeah, we're going to get some people that do it and don't value it and probably drop out of the hobby, etc. But, even if we get a small proportion, well, no, maybe not small, if we get a reasonable proportion of people that actually go on to remain in the hobby and become, lifelong amateur radio operators, then I think that's a great thing. So if this is a little thing, if this is a barrier to people getting a license, It might just be that it's just, they just can't quite afford, they've got to make choices and they just can't quite afford to spend the money on, they've got a choice of, buying school books or paying for an exam. Then this might just be the thing that gets them through. And this might just be the thing that gets us, some more people in the hobby that are young. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good point of view. I'll say I'm not going to labour my point of view because I've done this one before. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, I've been listening with interest in this. I think it should be done, and try it and see what the results are. That will show us. But you've got to have the data. Without the data, it's and I appreciate that's a bit of a moot point. But I pay my ARRL subs, and I have no objection to this being used for that reason. And I hope it's successful.
Yeah, the interesting one is, and as you say, we don't know. They're saying they do the first 1,000 at $5, but if they've only got 500 people doing it anyway, youngsters doing it a year, that's not going to be that big a deal. But as you say, we need to understand the figures, the numbers that they're crunching through to see if this is going to work. And hopefully, Frank, they will give you some information at some point in time. So that's where I'm going on that one. Moving to our next news story, apply for YOTA summer camp. Now, YOTA's come round again. This year it's in Croatia for our region. And I was looking at this. If you want to go, you've got to be between 15 and 25. And you have to be a member of the RSGB. This is where I stirred it up a bit earlier and said, well, since the RSGB only support 25% of the amateurs in the UK, that excludes 75% of amateurs that could go on this, because the RSGB only is looking after 25%, which is their members. But others of you have told me the RSGB membership is free up until you leave education, I believe. So, yeah, Chris, go on. You said you'd keep check.
I think you had a point about having to be a member of the RSGB. I think that's, I'm not sure why that is, to be perfectly honest. I'm sure there could be an innocent reason. I did a quick Google, had a quick look at the membership website for the RSGB, and it appears that if you're under 18, you can, and you're licensed. It's not anybody. You have to be licensed. I think. Then essentially under 21. Sorry, if you're under 21, I'll correct myself. Under 21, you will get a free. Essentially, you get a free membership if you're licensed. However, it's a written application. You can't just go online and click a link or something. You do have to actually apply for it, and you have to provide evidence that you are under 21, not just someone trying to get a free membership. And likewise, if you are a licensed amateur who is between 21 and 25 and in full-time education, you will again get a membership that's free. Interestingly, if you are under 21, you're not allowed to. So hang on a minute. Sorry, no. If you're under 16, you're not allowed to vote in elections. I think that's that we're looking at this. But again, you have to sort of prove that you are, that is your status, and you aren't just trying to get something for free. So there is a level of vetting going on. So essentially, if you do want to do the YOTA thing, it wouldn't cost you anything to join the RSGB unless you have a job, in which case you probably afford to pay anyway to join, to apply to be part of this YOTA camp this year.
Yeah, right on that one, Chris, and I know. Leslie, I'm going to bring you in next because the free membership, even for youngsters, to me, I've heard of so many people that have abused this in the past. I do wonder whether it's the right thing. What do you think, Leslie?
I've heard of people doing that, but I don't have any numbers to actually show that. So I need to be very clear on that. The RSGB may be able to supply the numbers. I don't know. What I would say, though, I understand where they're coming from, but I don't think, my own personal view is that I don't think this is the right type of thing to do when people are having difficulty financially. and have got to tighten their belts through losing their job, increasing costs, and they see RSGB members perceived, and I'm going to use that word, to be getting a holiday at their expense. So I don't. This doesn't go well with me. I understand where they're coming from, but I do think in the financial circumstances they just put a hold on things like this because it doesn't go down too well. But I'm going to emphasise that's only my own personal view. Over to you.
Okay, well, as I say, we've discussed it and things. Now, I do agree that we should have national societies, but when the national society doesn't support the majority of amateurs in that country, then that just worries me a little bit that, there will be...
Martin, can I just have a correction there?
Yeah.
The National Society, and I'm going to say any national society, and I'm not going to pick on one, is similar to a union. They're there to represent their members.
Yeah.
Then and in the radio terms, they're not there. I mean, they may be the only society in that country, be the ARRL, the RSGB, or others, but they are essentially there to represent their members. Now, I know some people vehemently disagree with me on that, but it is actually quite true.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we all have feelings on some of these things.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah. No. And it's a discussion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there will be people disagree, both you and I and Uncle Tom Cobley, but it doesn't...
Yeah, we sort it out later, Martin.
Yeah. And we don't end up behind the bike sheds with 50 cups either. So you're okay, boys. Okay. I know it's a UK story, guys, but Bill, what's your thoughts from a state's point of view?
Yeah, I kind of take a different look at it than you guys. It's the RSGB doing a little part to help encourage young RSGB members to, really do get an experience of a lifetime and hopefully come back and share. They're going to ship them off to the Croatian Amateur Radio Society in August. It looks like the middle of August. They're going to have workshops where they're, going to be operating the latest amateur radio equipment, both local and remotely, which I find interesting. They're going to do kit building, which that's probably one of my favorite things to teach kids anyway. And they're going to visit, the seaside and capital city in Croatia. I don't know how many students in the UK would get this opportunity other than this. And so I think it's really good that they're supporting this. And I get what everybody's saying about financial realities and situations, but I'm taking it the other way around. This is a very unique opportunity that a few students are going to hopefully take advantage of and enjoy and bring back some new perspectives to share with their clubs and friends and maybe help grow the hobby a little bit.
Yeah, that is a fair thing, but there won't be hundreds going. There'll only be, say, half a dozen from each country normally. I don't think there's that many, plus supporting staff. When I looked at the numbers at Gilwell Park a few years back from some of the other countries, there weren't that many amateurs from other countries in blocks. There wasn't, say, 50 people from country X and 30 people from country Y. It was quite small numbers. So yeah. Frank, what's your thoughts?
I'm listening. I'm gonna use the line that my good friend Leslie Butterfield used. I've listened with great interest, and I've learned a couple of things. And I think that both Leslie and Bill have captured different facets of a diamond. And let me articulate this from a little different perspective. Yes, membership organizations should represent their members. I mean, that is their reason for being. If Edmund was here, he could tell us in French, the raison d'etre. On the other hand, how do they get new members? How do they grow their membership? So there's a complementary set of activities, everything from advertising, whether it's RSGB or, hey, we're here, join. Well, that's getting new members. And to some degree, that represents the best interest of existing members, is to keep a viable organization. Bill making a very good point, and from being a professor in university and being around just a lot of programs, and sometimes being asked to evaluate the impact of those programs. So here in the U.S., now Bill will recognize this, we have a series of public universities that were established to help farmers and help rural communities. They're commonly called land grant institutions. And Bill, I'm going to say it correctly, the Pennsylvania State University in your state is one of the land grant institutions. I'm a professor emeritus at a land grant institution here in Mississippi, Mississippi State University. And so they have a youth program that's called 4-H, Head, Heart, Hands, and Health. And they try to do youth development through teaching them things. And they do everything from goat ropings to building houses to, when I was in 4-H, I wired a house. That was my first little foray into electricity that could kill you. That is, it didn't come from a 12-volt battery. And so I actually was contracted by Congress to evaluate the 4-H program. Did it have the impact that it should have? Some programs are very narrow in breadth. You want to take a small number of people, you want to give them an intense experience that will make an impact on them and will kind of keep them on pace to accomplish whatever the outcome is that's being desired. And that's really my perception of what YOTA is about. I've watched it in the U.S., our colleague who introduced us to Skyline Chili in Cincinnati, when we were there all at Hamvention, Neil Rapp, who has Ham Radio Live, he's been very much involved with YOTA here in the U.S. And I'll tell you, when they had it up at the Voice of America station, someone whom I have great respect for, the ham radio operator Steve McGrain in Luck, Wisconsin, who has a YouTube channel and his moniker is Temporarily Offline. He has two daughters who are licensed ham. And they went to YOTA. In fact, one of them won, I think, an ICOM 705. And from just watching what they said about it, it was, as Bill said, it was absolutely incredible. Now, they went from Wisconsin to Ohio. They didn't go to another country. So I think a lot of the international exposure bit, albeit on, Martin, as you said, a small number of young people, that would be just an incredible thing. So I understand both arguments. I think for the money that's being spent, the way to deal with Leslie's concerns, it's not just for Leslie, but for many people who say, oh, you're going on holiday for, whatever, is to make sure there's great publicity about the experience and what these particular people do. That's sort of how you sell the program and sell how you're using the money. That's my take, Martin.
Yeah, understood, Frank. And it's got to be a big promotional. And I think some interesting discussion points come out of this. And I think we'll probably discuss them on and off offline and here many times. But yeah, it's at least we're not sort of just agreeing with everything, which is good. Now, I know some of you disagree with the next news story. 40 megahertz Belgian regulators are... oh, look.
You set him off now, Martin. Go on.
I have, yeah. Belgian regulator is considering a new band and giving the Belgian guys 40 megahertz. Now, I know they've done this in Ireland. I'm going to be the grouchy old devil to start with. Guys, you can then pick this. Do we need any more bands? Let's be brutally honest. Go and try and find somebody. And, we're spread out over so many bands that it's sometimes difficult to find somebody to talk to. I did loosely jest when we were doing this earlier, having a run through the news stories, that maybe we should put all the contestants up there and leave us to have the rest of the bands. But But I think that's another throw in the hand
You've
grenade
just
room.
upset half the amateur radio
Seriously,
community.
Martin, we're going to get taken off the air. Seriously.
No,
But,
Just
no,
lost
but
half the
Leslie,
listeners now, Martin.
in the U.S., they've got about 10 more years, and they're going to be out of here. So,
yeah. No. In fairness, I said in jest,
You did say in jest.
but come on, it's a new band. Go on, Leslie, you go first on this one.
I played with 70 megs, which are like 50 megs. All I got was tons and tons of baby alarms all over the place. So it's when people are talking about new bands, and I'm all for it because I'm a radio amateur and I like new bands and all that stuff. But when you're sort of justifying it to the authorities, it's got to be, well, why do we need this? What's the research? What we're going to learn from it? Not more of the same, more of the old same. And doing more of the old same, I don't think is going to justify it anymore. We've got to use cutting edge stuff and show that we can really, I'll use that word, if we ever get more bands, that we're going to use them for more research and more good things for communications. I don't think more of the old stuff will cut it anymore. Not with the authorities. So that's where I am, Martin.
Yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming from because we got 10 meters, which is just below 30 megs, and we got 6 meters, which is at 50 megs.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just oversimplifying this, but I can't see any massive advantage that's going to happen halfway between those two bands.
I think, right, if you lower the frequency, your ground wave gets longer. So, for example, 70 megs, your ground wave is longer than, say, on 2 meters. And if I've got that wrong, I'm sure people will come up and say, Leslie, you got it wrong, but I believe that to be correct. So the lower, as you bring that frequency down, your ground wave ranges increase.
Yeah, but at the moment, why then do we not hear people on 10 megs, on 10 meters, when the sunspot cycles are rubbish?
Don't use 10 meters. I used it in the 1980s, but I don't use it anymore.
No, I know, but you hear where I'm coming from.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm picking a fight tonight. I'm sorry. Oh, dear.
That's all right.
Yeah, Colin's going to have me removed from the chair, I'm sure. Okay, Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Once again, I'm going to be contrary because I think it's awesome to get a band between 10 meters and 6 meters to give her a shot. Because this was, I didn't figure out what band this would be. This would be like 7 or 8 meters, 40 megs. There's some possibility there for some interesting propagation because it's close to the bottom of VHF. So I wonder how much properties it would share with 10 meters. And like sometimes we see some really neat stuff on 6 meters. Would that neat stuff on 6 meter openings happen more often at 40 megahertz? Or is that something special about 50 megahertz? So that's kind of why I'm interested in this whole story. But the one thing I want to point out for the listeners, the Belgium regulator is like, hey, we're here in Belgian stations using FT8 on 40.680. Don't do that. Wait till they get done figuring out if they're going to give you the band or not before doing that. But if you keep doing unauthorized FT8 transmissions with the Irish, the answer will be no. So don't jeopardize it as they're looking stuff over. Because I guess some people are using license exceptions, experimental licenses, basically, inappropriately. So don't do that.
Yeah, when you get issued a notice of variation, it does say what you should or should not do with it. So you are right there, Bill. If they've got a notice of variation, they need to behave themselves. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Well, Bill's raised some really interesting things here, and what I'm a kind of an antenna guy, so visions of what the Moxon for 40 megahertz would look like, a little less than what's one for 6 meters versus what's one for 10 meters. I think about 9 feet is a 6 meter. But It would be interesting, certainly. And I guess what would happen is if you're locked up over in Belgium, they would say, no chocolate for you, sir. You've been FT8ing on 40 megahertz without permission. So we learn these things, to be serious. We learn these things by doing the experiments. You know, we've been having some experimental licenses way down in lower frequencies below the broadcast band and some things like that. So fun and games. And I think experimentation is always a good thing if, as Bill said, people will follow the rules for trying it out and don't ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank, on that one. Don't ruin it. Chris, final words on this news story?
I'm kind of conflicted now, having heard both sides of the argument. I'm kind of agreeing with you, Martin. You know, if the bands were teeming with stations, particularly some of the high bands like 2 meters, for example, if they were just wall-to-wall people and there wasn't enough bandwidth for us all, then another band would be fantastic. So I sort of get the point. Look, if we don't use the bands, what we've been given, why should we get any more? But I also get the point that, well, actually having more bands lets the experimenters, the niche people on the edge of the hobby, the people that are pushing the boundaries to try things out and to experiment. So I'm kind of conflicted a little bit. I can't really give an opinion either way. I think, you know, if people find the use for this and, you know, think it's something that's worth pursuing and think that actually this particular frequency, because it's only one spot frequency from what I can see, are all very small that bandwidth they're looking to use for this test, then, or for this trial, then actually, you know, if it's not being used for anything else, then why not let people play with it? You know, you're not going to go out and buy a rig that's got that particular frequency. You're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to build a transverter or something for it. So people that are going to be using it are going to have to invest some time and effort to be able to do so. And so, I haven't really got a strong opinion, really.
Yeah, I think the problem is our hobby's massive. And there are people wanting to do this, all sorts of things. And I'm not trying to be the killjoy and say, let's not do any of the nice things and one thing or another. But equally, we are spread over everywhere. And, you know, 8 meters, well, hopefully somebody will prove me a lot wrong that 8 meters is a really good band and we really need to have it. And I would guess with the software-defined radios that are now becoming more commonplace, a modification to a software-defined radio may very well allow us to add that band in if we get given it. I think from what I read once, we're not likely to get it in the UK. So interesting. Yeah, maybe we have maybe we work them on split. You know, they're on 8 meters and we're on 10 or on 6. But it's an interesting one. Right, moving to our next news story. Now, I didn't realise this happened, but it was something that was published that the German radio amateurs celebrated Morse Code Day earlier towards the end of last month. So I thought it was interesting that there is a Morse Code Day, and I'm sure if Dan was here, he'd tell us more about it. Bill, would you like to go first on this one?
Yes, please. Most interesting things that I actually did not know when Samuel Morse's birthday was. It's April 27th. And it's a holiday all around the world that I didn't even realize. Likewise, I didn't know that Samuel Morse's middle name was Finley Breeze. That's also pretty cool. But it's nice that they had this. I'm wondering if they had any on the air events that I missed. Did I miss a certificate for a special event station? I'll have to jot down some notes for next year to see if I can catch any of these stations on there. And I wonder if I'm certain they used Morse code.
Yeah, well, as I say, that I think is quite a good thing to celebrate Samuel Morse's day. I mean, as we're recording tonight, this is the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you, I think is what today is all about. But
and with you.
Yeah, but I didn't pick that one up, so I was a bit slow on that one. So yeah. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Sorry, I think, yeah, I mean, any day that promotes the hobby, any day that promotes the use of Morse code, I'm sure we've got lots of people. I'm sure Dan will be saying, get on the air, as he normally does when he talks about Morse. Anything that promotes the hobby, we've got lots of different days. We've got Marconi weekend, we've got lightships on the air, we've got lighthouses on the air, we've got lots of events throughout the year, and I think this is another one which is great. It helps to promote a particular part of the hobby. As Bill was saying, we now know Samuel Morse's middle name, so I didn't know before, so that's interesting. Finley Breeze. So yeah, I mean, anything I think that just helps to get a particular part of the hobby, bit of promotion, I think is a good thing. So, why not?
Yeah, well, the other thing is, I'm sure if Edmund had known, he'd have wanted to take part in this because he likes special event calls, and I know he's trying to improve his Morse, which he was telling me the other day he's having a bit of success on. So, yeah, good day. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, Martin, I did know about this because it came up on the Gibraltar Facebook page, so I was very aware that the Morse Code, there was a Morse Code day, and they would put one little puzzle on it about the flag, and there was only one person answered it, HI. But anyway, Samuel Finley Breeze Morse. That's going to make an excellent quiz question that I simply must use in our local quiz that we have at our local club. So that's definitely going in there. So that's, I think it seriously though. I think it's it's about promoting radio, and it's about promoting the hobby as well. We can do that. So I think it's a good thing. Why not? Over to you, Martin.
Right. Well, all I'm going to say is, if you're a member of the Silverthorne Amateur Radio Society in Essex, and you don't listen to this podcast, and you get it wrong, it's your own fault for not listening to this podcast. That's right, isn't it, Leslie?
I know Teresa. She's a member of Silverthorne and Silverthorne Club, and she does quizzes. So I know definitely she will pick up on that question like lightning. So
yeah, no problems. Well, at least you got a shout out for your club as well. Yeah, Frank, what's your thoughts?
Well, this is a certainly intriguing story. I'm not a Morse code operator, certainly at this point, maybe in the future. But like a lot of historical stories, we learn some things. And I'll add two major things, I think major if you want to understand Samuel Morse. He wasn't the only one who helped develop it. His colleague, Alfred Lewis Vail, our story says, from the DARC, worked with him. Now, the classic is the Yagi antenna, which Mr. Uda gets some love because in some text and narratives, it's the Yagi Uda antenna. But usually there's one name that tends to prevail. As I sort of documented and talked about in a previous feature on the Lost Tribe, we all think about Hiram Percy Maxim as sort of the founder of not only the American Radio Relay League, but amateur radio, and that's just not so. In fact, the co-founder, Clarence Tuska, actually taught Hiram Percy Maxim all about the wireless. So as we dig into some of these stories, one of the things about the ICQ podcast that I've really enjoyed is that we tend to give it a thorough thrashing about to try to understand a little bit of the historical context. Now, here's something that I simply was not aware of prior to doing my reading and research on this story. I think of Samuel F.B. Morse with the long flowing beard and what by today's standards we might call scruffy appearance. By those standards of that day, perhaps not. You think about some person who was technical, who was interested in this thing called telegraphy, but how do we create a language, a symbolic language, and therefore he developed a code with Mr. Vail. He was a very noted, Yale-educated portrait artist. He spent part of his career fighting for what he called artist rights, and I don't know what the issues were, how they were being oppressed, but nevertheless promoting professional artists here in the U.S. after being trained in Europe. And he was thought of as one of the leading portrait artists in the United States during that period. So Marquis de Lafayette, for example, he did a very famous full-length portrait of him when that French person was here in the U.S. So I'll end with that. Those were two things that I gathered from this, that as we celebrate it, then let's celebrate perhaps a fuller history of what happened.
Then there's a story behind these inventions. There's a story, history, and a character's business, innovation, all that type of thing, isn't there, Frank?
There is, and I know you and I for sure, and maybe everyone here on the podcast, you and I really like digging in and understanding how that emerged. And I think I've not yet found something that was a boring story. There's usually some interest there, Leslie.
Well, I agree with both of you guys on that. I was aware that Samuel Morse was originally a portrait artist. I believe, and I could be wrong now, but I'm sure I read somewhere, or when I worked at the Portrait Gallery doing some radio work for them, when I was working for a radio company, there are a couple of his paintings in the National Portrait Gallery in the UK, in London. So if I've got that wrong, boys, I'm sorry, but I knew he was a great artist in his own right.
Martin, I was going to say, I remember seeing a painting by him. I didn't even spot the name until afterwards, after I seen the painting. Actually, the museum, I forgot which one it was now, but certainly at a gallery in New York. I think it's a Metropolitan. I forgot now. But basically, a gallery in New York. I remember seeing.
Yes, and also in the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington D.C., as well as the one you mentioned, Chris.
Yeah. So yeah, very, very, very good artist. And the Morse Code thing, I think, was probably very secondary. I think, certainly that was something I guess come much later in his lifetime.
Yeah, well, I would guess that it would have been about the time when radio was in its very infancy, and painting may have been his sort of day job. Let's put it that way. But radio was probably his hobby, or telegraphy was something he was thinking about. Maybe he had a need to do something, and people invent things to fix problems. So, yeah.
So I just checked it out. It was the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York where I saw a picture by him. So, yeah.
That's great. Okay, moving to our last news story. Female students to visit the DARC Amateur Radio Center. That's the DRC is the German regulator. And about 30 seconds after this episode goes out on Sunday, Ed Durant's going to email me and say, why are you covering a couple of German stories without me being on the group? But it's just the way it happens. But, okay. Who are we going to go with first? Leslie, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, Martin, I'm just sort of going through it. I'll just explain the story. 7 young women will spend a day at the DRAC Amateur Radio Centre on Thursday, the April 28th, to gain insights into the profession of engineering. The aim is to encourage more students to pursue STEM subjects, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I think this is a good thing. We need to encourage a lot more people in engineering. I know as I work on the railway industry, we need more people coming in, not just doing the soft subjects, please. And I'm going to get on my soapbox. We need people that can know how things work and can make things and can fix things. And it's so important. So I think, yes, this is for young ladies, but that doesn't matter in my book. It's about encouraging people into the profession. And I'm going to stand up as an engineer and say this is the right thing.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this all the way through. And for all we know, this might have been a young ladies' college so they've taken students from a young ladies' college rather than a mixed college. So, I felt a little bit, why are you singling out one sex or whatever? But yeah, the ladies aren't always best represented in our hobby. So I have not too much of a problem on that one. Bill, what's your thoughts?
I'm going to pretty much echo what Leslie says. Anything to encourage students to possibly, get into the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math careers. And I don't care what country you're in. We need folks worldwide to have an interest in science, technology, engineering, and math. And the fact they're specifically asking ladies to join in this experience is also really good, because that's the other flip side of the coin here is that we have very few folks specifically in engineering and technology fields to begin with, and of that it's disproportionately men. And in my particular industry in higher education, I can tell you we value different points of view, and the only way to get different points of view is to bring in different kinds of folks to work with. And so I'm hoping that this will inspire some of these ladies to choose a technology career or an engineering career. And I hope they do this more often, and I hope other places try to do this as well. Because that's, I groused about this at work a couple months ago when they were talking about our student programs, how we're reaching into high schools now to try to get folks to consider some of our majors. And I'm like, maybe we should even go further back and get them in middle school, maybe, so that even though they're only 12 or 13 years old, get them thinking then about what do you want to do for the rest of your life, and how we can maybe help them get into some high demand fields. We actually are reorganizing at work because we have so much demand for the health sciences. We're actually splitting all our health sciences off into their own college now because the programs are growing so large. So that's reassuring from my small corner of the universe. But we should be doing this, encouraging this stuff worldwide.
Can I sort of put a thing in there, please?
Please.
Right. I totally agree with you. What you don't want is more people like me. What we need, what we need is lots of different people from different backgrounds. Don't care where they're from, but when you're looking at problems, we need to look at problems with different eyes, and we come up with different solutions. And you look at something, and we have lots of guys at work, and they come from all over the place, and they say, oh yeah, well, if we do it that way, yeah, you know what, I didn't think of that, and that's a good thing. I'm all for it.
And tagging on to that briefly, a holistic view of any complex system problem requires many, many different views to actually see the problem completely.
You're right, guys, and having an open mind helps phenomenally. I'll be honest with you on that one. Okay, Frank, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm a champion of this for many of the reasons that have already been mentioned. And I think from the research I'm fairly familiar with is that girls get shunted away from what have traditionally been labeled as sort of male stuff. And I'm not even talking about jobs, but just content activities. And it's such a loss of human talent when that happens. But let them find their center by just reducing the barriers. How do you do that? You expose them to things as you would males. And sometimes males get exposed through other means besides an intervention of a program like this. We talked about that in a previous story, such as for YOTA, for example. That's a planned intervention, Leslie. To target something and try to, just like an experiment, we give them a treatment, and let's look and see, do we have the effect, controlling for where they were before, etc. And I've been around this a good bit. And some 35 years ago, in teaching statistics, women would appear in these classes along with men, and I'd see them with this angst. And it was foreign to me because I was raised by a grandmother and then a cousin in high school. I was raised by two strong women. My view of what being a man is not the bicep focused view. All your strength is in your biceps.
I get that.
So I've seen strong women. Now, my dad was a former Marine, so I was around some of that, but he didn't raise me. So I kind of had the advantage of seeing strength in women. So in teaching statistics, I would have women who would express that either privately, come to my office. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pass your class, and all the little I can't. And I would generally ask them a couple of things. Now, for our listeners, remember, this wasn't today. This was 3 decades ago. Things have changed to today. But 3 decades ago, I would say, do you know how to bake a cake? I don't. If you can bake a cake, you can make an A in this introductory statistics course because it's primarily following some rules laid down and understanding the ingredients and understanding about how you put them together comes to a certain outcome. In the case of statistics, a decision. In the case of a cake, something that tastes good and tastes like it should taste. And that's, may I ask, have you had a child? Because some were, older than the 18 to 21. And I would tell them, if you've had a child, you can get a PhD in this subject because I promise you, having and raising a child is much more complicated than getting a PhD in statistics. And I was honored midway through my career with the highest teaching award, primarily by female graduate students at Mississippi State with the Alumni Association. So I say all that from having tried to be a champion of opening doors for women to do stuff like this. Now, statistics in engineering, but there's a lot of statistics in engineering. So Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta that I'm very, very familiar with, they have developed programs to reduce those barriers for women, and they graduate as many female engineers of various kinds as well as mathematicians as any university in America. And they've done it by having all these treatment effects, if you will, Leslie, where they've got programs not unlike this, where females come to Georgia Tech and they see them changing the world in their laboratories and things, and they never tell them in any way they can't do it too. So bravo for this program in the DARC from my vantage point.
Yeah, that's a good one, Frank. That's a good one.
There's a phrase for that. It's called putting a dent in the universe.
Yeah. Chris, final words on this one?
Well, I've got very little to add, really. I think it's been said. I kind of agree that there's a gap. We know that the STEM subjects are an area where we need to invest and get people enthused and have the skills. And I think amateur radio is certainly an excellent way to get people into those particular subjects. So yeah, I think everyone said it already. To be fair.
Yeah, that's a great one. And you didn't get much because we covered it, Chris, but I understood. Right, that's the end of the news stories. Let's find out what the boys have been up to. And Bill has a hard stop. So, Bill, do you want to go first?
Yes, please. And mine's actually pretty brief because it's baseball and softball season here in Pennsylvania. So I've been at a lot of baseball and softball games. Only station I've worked in the last month, aside from the normal soda chasing that I do, is I was able to work the TX5 and the Expedition, the Austral Islands. I actually had them before. I didn't. It's been a while, but now I have them on data. So I had them on SSB before, now I have them on data. So that's always good. And the other thing is I hemmed and hawed for 2 days, and I finally bit the bullet, and I upgraded Smart SDR to 3.3 to 2.29, and my poor Flex 6300 has the failed SD card. So part of this time around, one of the things they did is they improved the checking on the SD card health as part of the upgrade process. And I have a new SD card on its way from Flex Radio. And, I know I don't know this, but the joke is that I think you're supposed to get on Facebook Flex page and complain that your radio's bricked. But the reality is, as soon as I saw the 3 flashing red dots, I immediately turned around and opened a ticket on Flex Radio's website. I opened it at like, I don't know, 9 o'clock at night. First thing in the morning, I get a reply to do a reset procedure. I did the reset procedure. It did not resolve the issue, and replied to the ticket. And, by, I don't know, noon Central Time, I got told that, we're sending you an SD card and, give me your address. So I'm really pleased is what I'm getting at. And this is what I wanted to share with the listeners. I'm very pleased with the tech support I got from Flex Radio. They did this check intentionally, and I decided to do it now instead of in the middle of a contest, when that is the worst time for your radio to die. for the SD card to fail would be in the middle of a contest. So I did it now before, any of the contests that I'm interested in operating are coming up. And I'll report next time on how that goes, but it seems to be a straightforward swap procedure. So, and that's all I have for this month. And 7-3s, everybody. I got to jump out of here.
Okay, Bill. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. And let's say at least you got your Flex Radio fixed, and that's nice to hear. Good news from suppliers. I covered something last episode on Amazon replacing it, just giving me my money back on something I'd had 3 months that suddenly became unserviceable. So, but I'm sure you're pleased you got your radio sorted, because I know you like that one. All right. Okay, Frank, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, primarily writing. The current issue of Practical Wireless has my artisan-built soldering platform. The article title is Need a Hand or 6, and it's a platform I designed for my own workbench, but it's in use up at Mississippi State University's electrical engineering program on their ECAR program. And the cover of Practical Wireless this month has a young man who is the son of a fellow ham. His name is Jonah Gandy, and he's using that platform for wiring an ECAR harness. Now, Jonah just finished his master's degree, and he's moving to Silicon Valley to work for Tesla. He's done very well. And I will say, if you think amateur radio is not that important, his department head and his major professor were elated to find out, when I sent him the cover picture and the article, that one of their students appeared on the cover of the Practical Wireless, a 100-year-old publication in the United Kingdom. So I was as much happy for Jonah and that as I was to get that article in. But Don is so easy to work with. Another paper on building out and testing the Australian HF bandpass filter from VK Amps is titled, If You Operate in a Crowd, You Need a Bandpass Filter, But Should You Build or Buy? That's scheduled for publication in the June issue of CQ magazine, according to Rich Moseson, editor in CQ. They do the field day edition or there, and so it'll be featured there, I'm told. Also, the paper I've mentioned before, Dr. Scott McIntosh, on the cusp of scientific revolution in terms of sunspot cycle theory and projections. It's got the galley proofs back into Elaine Richards, the editor at Radcom, and she tells me it's scheduled to appear in the July issue. She's just been a dream to work with, especially when you consider in the midst of losing the technical editor at Radcom due to a rapidly progressing cancer, and COVID-19 keeping about half of the RSGB staff out of their posts. So she's been juggling a lot of balls. Martin and I have talked, and he will try to get Scott and me corralled into probably a Zoom interview to interview us about that as a feature for the podcast. Now, I will say that Flex Radio Systems is having Dr. McIntosh come to Hamvention as their banquet speaker on what he's been doing mainly, and he'll use some of the work that we've got in the Radcom issue, I think, as the banquet speaker for Flex Radio Systems. Outside of writing, I've been building some analytical tools on my foxmikehotel.com website. Now, these are visualization tools to examine the Sherwood tables along that I've updated to March 5th. And yes, it does have the Elecraft K4D and the FTDX10 from Yaesu and some of the latest rigs from Rob's table. So I've got the composite index of those with the market price entry, that is when it entered the market, what price they required of it, and the year of release by the manufacturer, as well as the cumulative EHAM rating. Now, I've done several things. One of the questions that I've got, and I know when I spoke to the Sutton and Cheam Club, among others, one question that I've got is, why can't I sort the table how I want to, like by sensitivity or something? So I have a sortable Sherwood table there on my website, and you can sort it by any one of Rob's tests you want to, including the narrow dynamic range that he prefers as a CW contest operator. And I've also have the Sherwood Performance Index, which is all of them put together. And so got a number of other tools. If you like 3D rendering, there's an interactive 3D visualization where you've got a data cube with the Sherwood Performance Index, price, and EHAM rating. And it's got some cool features that allow you to click on a data point, and you'll see what radio it is, and it'll immediately link to those three data elements, and you can kind of go that route. One person emailed me and said you might take Dramamine or something for air sickness because you can spin that thing just like a fighter pilot. Another one is the Magic Quadrant from Gartner to identify the best for the least type of analysis. And I'm calling mine the Golden Quadrant to identify the rigs that have above average performance on Sherwood's test and above average EHAM rating with specific price points for what it costs, as well as a performance for price. And by the time this podcast drops, I'll have the password protection off of those radios removed. I wanted to go through them with Rob to make sure I didn't miss anything. So been doing a good bit of programming there on my website. Not much operating since the last episode, Martin, other than just reading the mail, listening, and monitoring propagation conditions using Whisper. I will end that I'm outlining a paper because I get a lot of questions from people about, I look at the Whisper map and I can't make sense out of it. It's just a bunch of arrows. And that's true. They're just putting the data dump out there. You can make some selections, but there are many alternatives to the whispernet.org site. And one of them is whisper.rocks, and Phil VK7JJ is the publisher of that. He maintains it. And I've been interacting with him to add some features to it. And I'm taking that with the ability to do selective searches for maybe beacons around where you are if you don't have one like I do, or receivers around where you are, to kind of zoom in, if you will, or focus in on propagation that will best benefit you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get that completed, Martin. But yep, 2 more weeks and I've stayed out of trouble again.
Well, that sounds great to me, Frank, and you've been very, very busy. And a bit of feedback from people I've been talking to on the talk group here in the UK. Your Fed files, most of them thought, well, it's nothing really to do with us, and including me. But when I heard it prior release, and those that have I've had quite a few good comments back about it of how they enjoyed it because it was something different. We might not be able to do some of the things you guys do in the States, but it certainly got very positive responses, Frank.
Well, thank you very much for that. And the Spectrum Monitor that he writes a column in has a number of other writers who are every bit as enlightening as Chris. But I appreciate that feedback from our listeners.
Yeah. Leslie, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
We have been messing about with an antenna for the club. We were sort of disappointed where it was. It was actually put in the loft for various reasons, which I won't go into. So we've decided at the club that it's got to go outside. And so my last couple of weeks have been liaising with the building manager. You know, get people involved so they know what we're doing, and what can we do, how can we do it. No, you can't drill into that part. Okay, well, how do we solve? Again, it's about solving problems. So we've got all the bits together, and we've got the broadband dipole we're going to put up, and hopefully we get that up and running as soon as we can. Then we can be back on HF again. So that's where we are, Martin.
Yeah, sounds good to me. So you've been having a fair amount of fun. So that's good. That's good, mate. Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, do you know what? I've just been making some notes. I didn't think I did an awful lot until I started just typing some things in there. There's a few things on this little list I'll go through. So just to cover off something that Frank mentioned earlier about using the Gartner hype cycle. Sorry, the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Sorry, is a good way to illustrate, plot things on a map or a chart. I think the hype cycle. If you've ever seen the Gartner hype cycle, that's quite an interesting. Another way to show trends and where things are in the cycle of technology. Some nice terms on there, things like the trough of disillusionment and the slope of enlightenment, that sort of thing. I think that's quite an interesting way to analyse where products are or technologies are in their life cycle. So maybe someone could do that, some amateur radio related or something similar to that in the future. But what have I been up to? So I am preparing to go out in my camper van. I've got a big long holiday coming up in a couple of months' time. So I've got a radio now installed in my camper van, and I've had some real frustration programming both it and the handheld that I recently bought. Real frustration. Spent many, many hours trying to figure out why I couldn't get the software to program certain things into it, and it took an awful lot of figuring out. And I'll give you an example. So I'm sure everyone's heard of Chirp, the free software that lets you program many, many different radios. Well, I actually found that Chirp, in a lot of ways, actually works better than some of the manufacturer's own tools for programming radios. So I won't name the manufacturer, but for example, I downloaded from the UK repeaters.net, which is the RSGB repeater site for lists all the repeaters in the UK. I downloaded various CSV files from there to try to build I guess you call it a code plug, a configuration for a particular radio, and trying to import that into the manufacturer software would just say error. It would, I tried. I think, I thought I had the right fields, the right length of fields, all that I thought was all right, and I've got a file that contains 500 lines, 500 different memories, and it just said error. It wouldn't tell you what line the issue was on. It wouldn't say what the issue was. It just said it didn't work. Now, if I tried the same thing with Chirp, Chirp will say, well, actually on line 36, you've got a comma in the wrong place or a full stop, or that's the character's wrong, or that frequency doesn't match something. So much, much better. So a bit of feedback for the manufacturers, look at Chirp and see if you can use that as to improve your software, because something that's free actually works, in my opinion, much better than some of the stuff you pay for. I'm talking now about the software the manufacturers themselves or the equipment provide, not any third-party software that you pay for. But certainly Chirp, I'm being quite impressed with. But no, what it turned out was, one of the issues I had was that you had to put in, obviously you're probably aware, with an FM repeater, you typically have a CT/CSS tone to open the repeater up. And a particular repeater, or a number of them in the UK, have 67 hertz as the tone. But for this software to recognise, I had to say 67.0 hertz. Didn't put 0.0, it didn't like the file, and that took me an awful long time to go through each line by line and find out what the issue was. And there's nothing in the manual, there's no instructions anywhere that tell you that's the case. You just trial and error. So that was quite frustrating. So yeah, the camper van is kind of coming along. I've got the dual bander in there now for using on the road. I think Solar Cycle 25 seems to be picking up. I accidentally had my radio set to 5 watts last night. I was playing around with a manual tuner, and I was tuning in 20 meters on the radio last night. And normally I turn the power down when I'm tuning up, because there's no need to run 100 watts when you tune the radio. And I forgot to turn the power back up again. And I happened to respond to someone in the Russia calling CQ, and he came back and gave me a 5.9 plus 30. Only then did I realise I was still running 5 watts. So when I told the guy, he was really quite surprised that I managed to give him such a strong signal on such a low amount of power. So I think I think things are improving. 20 meters seems to be pretty active actually now in the evenings here in the UK. So that's all very positive. We had a great talk at the club a few weeks ago. So Mike Gloystein, who's done talks for us on the podcast before a couple of times, he works for the British Antarctic Survey, and he did a great talk for us the other day all about his job. And they've now got a new ship since we last spoke to him on the podcast, and he was telling us all about the things he's been getting up to. So that was really good. And Martin, I think, mentioned it earlier. There was or maybe didn't actually, perhaps you mentioned it on the pre-chat. We was an online session, I think it was a couple of nights ago, where SDR Play did a Q&A session, which was really, really interesting. There was no fixed agenda, it was just people asking questions. So that was quite good. I got a few tips there on using the SDR Play equipment. What else? Oh, just one other thing. I don't know if anybody in the UK has a TV program called Have I Got News For You, which is a kind of long-running satirical TV program, kind of comedy program that runs on the BBC, and they have a section on that called Guest Publication, where they get some kind of niche magazine and have quotes from it. People have to guess what the headlines are, and they chose Practical Wireless as the magazine on a recent episode. So that was pretty cool. I don't think I saw any of your quotes on there, Frank, particularly, but that was quite nice to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was it for me, Martin. Back to you.
All right. Well, we've all been busy. I'm trying not to hog it a little bit because it was like you. And when I sat down 2 hours ago, I thought, what have I actually done in the last couple of weeks for me? And then I realised just how busy I have been. And these are the things that probably interest people. I worked young Edmund Spicer, a fellow presenter. He was at Amberley Chalk Pits Museum operating Marconi Day, and they were operating G2 November Mike. And I thought it'd be nice. Our club holds another G2 call sign, so I thought it'd be nice to work him with the club call sign. So we actually worked him as GX2, X being for the club call sign. So we were GX2 XP, and had a nice little chat with Edmonds. He was quite excited. Today in the post I have a QSL card, Chris, which I need to give to either you or Alex, but got a nice little QSL card from him, so that was quite good. Like you said, I did enjoy the open session with SDR Play, and Andy for Ham Radio Network put that one on Monday. We were able to make it because normally on Monday night we're at a club meeting, but because it was bank holiday in the UK, no club meeting happened. So we joined in on the Ham Radio Network conference call, and that was good fun. What else I've been up to? Got given an 80 amp hour battery, leisure cum car battery, and I've switched that into my battery box as opposed to the 120 amp hour battery. Now you're going to say, why have you reduced your put a battery in at 2/3 the capacity of the one you've just taken out? Very simple. When I have to carry it from my shed that's at the bottom of the garden or the backyard in the States through the house with about 3 doors and then put it into the back of the car, God, I don't want to play radio once I've done that. It's so heavy, it's almost a hernia box in its own right. So I'm really pleased. The lighter weight, the smaller battery will do everything I want, and it's a lot lighter to carry. And I'm no lightweight, to be honest with you. Also been playing a little bit with D-Star. I mentioned the other week a D-Star radio came my way, one I reviewed about 12 years ago. And been interesting looking at that and playing with it. It's just being used as a monitor in the house to monitor the talk group, but it's interesting to have a look at that one. I've spent a fair amount of time on 2 meters, 4 meters, 70 SEMs and the talk groups. Sometimes some of the chats on the talk group can be an hour and a half. But yeah, we do chew the fat on there at times, and had some good contacts on 4 meters. And I know the guys in the States don't have that, but certainly around the London area, 4's quite active. Ed did send us a notification that in later in the year there's a EMF camp, which is a kind of a science camp, but that's in Herefordshire, so it's probably a bit too far away for me to go. And AMSAT are going to be there, but we'll put a link on our website for that one. And last but not least, don't forget, on the 14th of this month, 14th of May, we're going to have our Digital Voice Activity Day. And the Digital Voice Activity Day will be on between 0800 UTC and 2000 UTC. Now, I'm not expecting everybody to be on all the time. In fact, I might not be on the whole time, but it's not about just always talking to me or one of the other presenters. There's some interesting people that come up on this group, some very interesting people. So it's your opportunity to have a chat with some interesting people, or have a chat with us as well, the podcast presenters. We're going to be there. So that's what I've been up to, pretty much in VHF and UHF. Oh, and I have done some HF as well. Did a little bit of HF, and not overly happy with the antenna I'm running at the moment, but that's another story. So that's what I've been up to. All in all, we've all been pretty busy. Right, all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for joining us. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Thank you, Martin, and always a pleasure, and just really enjoy the discussion.
Yeah, that's great. Also, I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB, for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Martin. And I do like listening to other people's points of view on things. Nothing's ever black and white. It's been interesting tonight.
Yeah, I think the thing is these days the art of conversation has gone, or discussion, and we do get into interesting discussions. Sometimes I know that I will throw the hand grenade in the room just to generate that discussion, but yeah, it's been good. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Bill Barnes left us a little while ago, but he did say 73s when he went, Bill WC3B. And you probably missed Mr. Martin Rothwell, who's often trying to get me into trouble. Unfortunately, he didn't feel particularly well tonight, so we give him the time off. Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL, will be back on another podcast. So I'd like to say 73s to you all, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73, guys.
Cheerio.
73.
Everyone.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin, M6BLY. We start off with news here of a special event station that's taking place where amateurs in Londonderry in Ulster, Northern Ireland and Kansas will be on air to celebrate the 90th anniversary of the Transatlantic crossing by the pioneer aviator Amelia Earhart. GB0 Alpha Echo Lima will be active from the 13th of May to the 30th of May. And the Northwest Group Amateur Radio Club station Mike November 0 November Whiskey Golf will host and activate on most days throughout the event, and will be also active from the field in which Amelia touched down on an epic flight on the weekend of the 21st of May. Kilo Charlie 0 Victor Yankee Sierra will also be on the air from the Amelia Earhart Memorial Airport, and they'll be on the air from 2100 GMT or 1500 CDT on May the 20th, ending at 1000 CDT or 1500 GMT on the 21st of May. So we've got a couple of links to both stations for you. We'll put them on icqpodcast.com for you, and so you can check out those from there for you. We head off now to New Zealand, where reports that the regulator has continued the sub-license 60-metre allocation at 63512 1.5 to 6366.5 kilohertz. This was announced recently that the new license with the same terms and conditions as the previous license will take effect when the old license expires on the 4th of May. So it looks like really just a case of renewing and sort of picking up that usability from there. So good news that the New Zealanders are continuing to work away on 60 meters, and as I say, hopefully that will continue to move forward into a more permanent allocation down the line. We finish up the news in brief section here with great news that Dayton Hamvention is back, and I'm very jealous to all of you that are going this year. The event, which takes place on the 20th to 22nd. Now, anyone who's been before will know the scale of this event, or anyone's going for the first time. Trust me, it's probably the biggest hamfest I know of. I know some will probably argue others, but it's certainly there's a lot to see and do. So to make it easy for you, the guys have released a app for your mobile phone for both Apple and Android devices, where, as I say, you can plan your trip and make sure you see everything you want to see across the 3 days of the show. So I say certainly well worth downloading. As always, we'll put our links into the new ICQ podcast page for you, so you can pick up that handy application before you go and say check out the people in there. They've done this before. I remember when we were there about 3 years ago, when I think they first introduced the app, it was quite helpful to make sure you got round to say all the attendees and the people you wanted to see. So well worthwhile checking out from there. Right, well now we head over to our features episode, which is a feature on buying Handy Talkies, new or second hand. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this feature I wanted to talk about, do you buy a brand new Handy Talkie, or do you buy something second hand that may be a swap meet? Well, I think there are a number of issues you need to consider when you do this. This feature basically came out of the fact that an ICOM IC91D came into my possession not so long ago. And it wasn't 100% complete, not a problem. When you get it given to you, you don't complain. However, some of you might be thinking at a swap meet, God, I could buy that. Oh, that would be useful. But here I'm going to give you some suggestions and things to think about. When you look at a radio at a swap meet, I would suggest you try it out. See if you can make the local repeater. See if you can have a contact with your mate or your friend at the other end of the complex. Make sure it actually does work, in fairness. And keep an eye on the battery meter. If the battery meter drops instantly when you're transmitting, then maybe you've got a dicky battery that's about to die. More about that later. But you need to have a good look round a Handy Talkie. Look for case damage. Has it been dropped? How many times has it been dropped? They all get dropped occasionally. Some of them say that they're waterproof, IP67 rated, which is waterproof for 30 minutes at a metre in water. Don't hold that as gospel. If somebody's had it apart to repair it or to modify it or to add an option, I'll tell you now, the IP67 rating is now out the window and not valid. Other things you might want to look at is, often PMR rigs come up, and they're quite cheap at rallies. Now, years ago, the old Motorola GP340s used to come up, and they'd be like £30-40 each, which sounds quite a good option. They're 16 channels, no display, but then you've got to start thinking about, you don't just buy the radio, you've got to buy a charging unit for it, which will probably cost you another $30. And then you probably want to program the thing, because it's no good to you without a keypad on the front. It needs to be programmed. Programming cable might cost you another $25. I know some of the cheaper Belfangs and that are much more economical for their programming cables, but a lot of cables are expensive. For argument's sake, the ID92D that came my way, if I wanted a programming cable for that, they don't seem to be available by anybody. No dealer has got them. And it's understandable. They're 12 years old. Nobody probably wants to hold stock of those. So you look round and you think, I'll go for an RT Systems setup, which is the cable and the software. Good idea, if you bought the radio new. To buy the RT Systems for, say, my 9200 would cost me in the region of £70, which is probably closer to $100 for you guys. On a radio you've just been given. So I'm not being a misery and saying it's bad, but you need to look at it and go, because that is a very specialised programming cable. Now, the classic, when I was thinking about getting a programming cable for my 92D, I looked and say £70 in the UK. If you bought it direct from RT Systems, I could download the software instead of getting the CD, and with the downloaded software I only had to have the cable sent to me, and the cable was about $35–40 shipped. So there is ways round it to reduce the cost, but be aware you may very well end up paying shipping costs if you're not in the country, or import tax duties if you're not in the country of origin where it's shipped from. You can improve them with better antennas, and often second-hand antennas on radios. I would not buy a second-hand antenna for a handy talkie. The ones often on the radio have been chewed and one thing and another. They worry me because people haven't electrocuted themselves in the mouth yet. But you don't want one that's chewed. There's a lot of other things on this worth checking out. Be aware. Ham radio dealers very rarely, if at all, sell handy talkies second-hand, because they aren't something they want to get involved with. They do suffer a fair amount of abuse. Programming leads, I talked about the one for my ID92D. Yeah, you be aware you will need to buy potentially a programming lead. So when you start looking at it, you might buy a rig for say £50, up to say £50. Your chances are you're going to have to buy a new battery for it, because if it's a second-hand rig, the battery life isn't going to be that great. It's probably why the guy sold it, or selling it anyway. So with a new battery, you're going to have to buy a programming cable. If the charger isn't there, you'll have to buy a charger. If not, you'll have a charger anyway. And all that adds up. And I look at it and go, in fairness, why would I buy something second-hand with so many pitfalls along the way, where I could buy a reasonably priced handy talkie for new with a proper warranty on it? So, in fairness, I know this is a quick one. There's far too many reasons why I would never buy a handy talkie second-hand. With one caveat on that, unless it done something very specific that I needed. And in my case, it would have been D-Star. And the reason for that is D-Star radios are always expensive and you pay a premium for them. So you might decide that what you're paying for your radio, D-Star radio and a swap meet, compensates the fact that you've got to buy a new battery and other bits and pieces to go with it. So just a thought, before you rush out and buy a handy talkie at a rally, buyer beware. Test it. Please test it before you leave, and make sure you've got all the bits. The radio on its own is probably not a good buy. I hope this was of interest.
Well, welcome back, everybody, and as always, we hope you've got something from our feature, and certainly something that should tickle all of us there about buying handy talkies, and we're not new or second-hand. as there are so many options out there. I'm sure of every rally and event and conference you go to, there's certainly lots of options to potentially pick up a bargain. So hopefully our feature gives you some help there. And more than anything else, it'd be great to get out to these events. I know they're starting to spring up more and more now. Dayton Hamvention happens in about a week or so's time from this release date, and others are springing up all the time. So good to have a think again about those perceived bargains, or whether or not they're bargains or not. So thanks a lot there for the feature. Well, feedback next episode, and first off, thanks to Don Morgan for his very fine and kind comments on the podcast. That was from the LinkedIn group, and say thanks a lot for your positive feedback, Don. We do appreciate it. And we've also got news in relation to our digital talk group event that's taking place next weekend on the 14th of May. And news that Andy, Mike Zero X-Ray Zulu Sierra, will be connecting his D-Star repeater GB7 Whiskey Romeo to the event as well. So good to know that, I say, we're getting repeaters connected in as well as the many modes that you can get involved in this event, Dad. So give people a bit more of an overview if they want to potentially talk to their favourite ICQ podcast presenter using our digital talk group, how they need to get involved, and as I say, in the hours we're going to be online next Saturday, the 14th of May.
Yes, certainly will, Colin. Well, as you said, next Saturday, 14th of May, as I've already published on the internet, and I'll rattle the tin again to make everybody aware it's happening. We are going to be active on our talk group between 0800 UTC and 2000 UTC. So, kind of, guys, it's a 12-hour block. I can't guarantee all of us are going to be available all of the time. However, in a nice way, you don't only have to talk to us. There are loads of very, very interesting guys that I've spoken to on the podcast talk group, and that's very, very usable. Now, if you don't have a hotspot, but you have a digital radio, you can still access us through various repeaters. I accessed the talk group last night through GB7AU, which is about 30 miles from me. I was a D-Star repeater. There are Brandmeister repeaters around the world. There are D-Star repeaters around the world. And there are people with Fusion around the world. So if you want to come and join us, great. We'd love to hear from you. It's going to be a bit of a chat. It's not a 5-9 go away next. It's, come and have a chat. And I know the guys down in Western Australia are talking about being on as well. So that should be quite a nice day, hopefully, Colin.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, we're going to get as many presenters popping on during the day as possible. As I say, unfortunately, we can't guarantee the exact times at the moment. But as I say, we'll be floating around throughout the day. But more importantly, this is a service we've, as I say, set up and configured for the greater audience. So as I say, if we're not on, I guarantee you'll be able to talk to a lot more interesting people than us anyway. As I say, and hear what's they have to think and say and what they're doing in the hobby. So we really do invite you along for that day to keep in touch with us and as I say, hear what's going on from there. So looking forward to that one a lot. Now, one of the great ways you can guarantee Martin stays on that day of digital activity is to make sure he's played with coffee. And one of the ways you can do that is by helping us out with our running costs on the ICQ podcast by, popping a donation for the value you see in the show and events like the digital group, etc. You can do what our monthly and subscription donors done this episode, and that's by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate and forward some value to us that shows your value in the show. So we'd really appreciate you taking some time, as I say, and helping us out with that. And I promise you, as I say, the more coffee we can keep inside Martin, the more we keep him awake, and we can keep him on the digital talk group day. So that'd be much appreciated. Well, as always, I'd like to thank our colleagues that took part in the News Roundtable with us this episode. That's Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3, Bravo, and Leslie, Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo. So thanks a lot for your time at this episode and help us out there with that News Roundtable. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up everything for this episode. Now, I have heard a rumour this morning that Mrs. B looked after you with a fine breakfast this morning. So I think it's only fair you return the favour and make her a cup of tea and maybe find her a nice little treat to go with it to thank her for that fine breakfast you got given.
I certainly will, Colin, and I've got to tell you, I had 2 egg and bacon rolls this morning. So that was good news. I really enjoyed that. So, yeah, after we finish recording, I'm going to pop out the shack, go and see Mrs. B, make her a nice cup of tea, and I'm sure there's a chocolate biscuit in the tin for her as well. So that'll be good news. And, yeah, I'm really looking forward to next week, the talk group of being available. I'm going to try and make myself available for the whole time, but there will be odd times I will probably have to duck out for a few minutes to deal with things here. But in fairness, please join us. It would be nice to see the talk group humming. Just like some of the other major talk groups do. And, in fairness, we've had 42 countries now connect through. And there are going to be some interesting people that have said they're going to join. So that'll be good news, Colin, I'm sure. And hopefully you'll be on as well.
Yep, certainly intend to spend some time on that as well. So, as I say, similar sort of thing. I'm sure I'll be ducking on and off during the day. As of yet, the Harmonics haven't yet decided how much of my time they're going to take that weekend. But as I say, I certainly hope to be on, on and off throughout the day. So, we'll be on there. And there's a lot of people that sometimes joke that sometimes my call sign can be one of the more difficult ones to get hold of, where you got an opportunity next weekend. So, certainly listen out and so we'll go from there. Right, well, on that note, so I'm going to let you head off and make Mum that lovely cup of tea and look after. And I'm going to bid everybody else 73s. And as I say, guys, look after yourself, enjoy the hobby, and we'll be back again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
Yeah, 73.